All it takes is one bad day to reduce the sanest man alive to lunacy. A clown named Arthur Fleck prepares for work. Standing in front of a cracked mirror, he paints his face, forcing his mouth into a smile. He physically molds his face into something acceptable, something that won't scare people away. However, a single tear slips through the makeup. Outside, Arthur dances on the sidewalk, spinning a sign for the business that hired him, trying to turn humiliation into a performance. But Gotham City is a dark and rough place that has no mercy. A group of kids snatch the sign and sprint away. Arthur follows them into a narrow alley. With Arthur lying on the ground, he's knocked and beaten, left curled on the concrete as the laughter fades. Later, Arthur sits across from the therapist, his laughter spilling out uncontrollably as he talks about how hard it's becoming to exist out there. She listens, detached but polite, noting that the city is strained. People are frustrated, angry, looking for someone to blame. She asks to see his notebook. Arthur hands it over, explaining that he writes jokes in it because he dreams of being a comedian. Flipping through the pages, she finds something else instead. Dark, desperate thoughts, scrawled between punchlines. I just hope my death makes sense than my life. When she asks how he feels about their session, Arthur answers quietly. He felt better when he was locked away in a hospital, and also mentions how the high dosage of his medications is not making him feel any different. Arthur, a man suffering from several mental disorders, has an illness that causes him to have a sick and uncontrollable laugh, often putting him in uncomfortable situations, which at the same time separates him from others by categorizing him as a freak. With autodestructive thoughts, socialization problems, he is visibly very depressed. Arthur gets on a bus, where he tries to make a child laugh. However, the child's mother gets annoyed and asks him to stop. Arthur starts laughing uncontrollably, which makes the woman even more uncomfortable. He gives her a card explaining that his laughter is caused by his condition. He is not only rejected by his personality, but his own body betrays him time and time again, exposing him to ridicule and being despised by others. Arthur's life was an uphill battle, and we see this symbolized when he gets off the bus and every day. He has to climb stairs. He looks visibly tired. He returns to his apartment that he calls home, a place worn down by neglect and time. He checks the mailbox, empty, and climbs the stairs to the small apartment he shares with his mother. She asks if there were any letters. Arthur tells her no. Penny's been writing for years to Thomas Wayne, her former boss, convinced that one day he'll answer. They sit together in front of the television as Murray's Franklin shows begins. As the studio lights flicker on, Arthur drifts into a fantasy. In his mind, he's no longer alone on the couch. He's sitting in the audience. Murray notices him, singles him out, and invites him to speak. Arthur stands and admits that he lives with his mother, that he takes care of her. The crowd laughs, but Murray quiets them, explaining that he once lived alone with his mother too, abandoned by his father before fame ever found him. The words land deeply. Arthur says he understands. In this imagined moment, he's always been the man of the house, always taking care of her. The audience applauds. Arthur goes on to say that his mother loves him, that she tells him to smile, to put on a happy face, because his purpose is to bring joy into the world. The applause grows louder. Murray smiles, tells Arthur that he likes his attitude, and invites him down to the stage. Arthur walks forward, wrapped in approval, until Murray embraces him and says that he would give up everything he has to have a son like him. Then, just as quickly, the fantasy fades. Arthur is back on the couch, smiling to himself. Here, we can note many things that would help us understand Arthur and the suffering he has gone through. Arthur is a man utterly on his own, with no safety net to fall back on, living with a severe mental and neurological illness that shapes every part of his life. The only person close to him is his mother, Penny, who herself appears deeply unwell. Beyond her, Arthur has no meaningful relationships. He is pushed to the margins, socially isolated, and his neurological and psychological conditions only make that isolation more intense. The only help available to him comes from underfunded public services, institutions that feel more bureaucratic than compassionate. He is prescribed 7 different medications, yet nothing improves. And that isn't surprising when we consider the world he's forced to survive in. Arthur's pain doesn't exist solely in his mind. It is constantly reinforced by his surroundings. He moves through a city that offers no understanding, no patience, and no real support. People recoil from him, mock him, or turn away because they don't understand his behavior. As long as the environment that fuels his suffering remains unchanged, Arthur has little chance of getting better. Regardless of how many pills he takes, a life defined by ridicule and humiliation makes healing almost impossible. Seen through his lens, Arthur's fantasy becomes not only understandable, but inevitable. He is someone who spent his entire life being rejected, someone desperate to feel acknowledged, to feel visible. His mother has told him again and again that his purpose is to bring happiness to others, to make them laugh. And Arthur clings to this belief because it's the only thing that gives his life any sense of meaning. That's why Murray Franklin becomes so important to him. In his imagination, Arthur doesn't just admire Murray, he projects himself onto him. Murray speaks of a past where he lived alone with his mother before achieving success, a story that mirrors Arthur's own. Whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. What matters is what Murray represents. Everything Arthur wants to be. Someone who makes people laugh, someone who's loved, respected, and seen, while also seeing him as the father figure he never had. Arthur believes that if he can follow his path, he can become like his idol, and he'll finally earn a place in the world. But the film slowly reveals a harsher truth. No matter how hard Arthur tries, reality offers no such mercy. The following day at work, Arthur's co-worker learns about the beating and offers him a gun, framing it as a way to protect himself. Not long after, Arthur is called into the boss's office. Customers complained when he vanished and never brought the sign back. Arthur tries to explain that he was attacked, but his boss dismisses the story and tells him the cost of the sign will be taken out of his pay. There's no sympathy, only punishment. Arthur leaves, kicking a trash can in frustration. We can see how his anger is slowly building up inside him. Later, in the elevator of his apartment building, Arthur shares a quiet moment with his neighbor, Sophie. A glance turns to a smile. Brief, fragile, but meaningful to someone starved for connection. And I think it's curious that this is one of the few times where this is a real smile. And I think it's interesting that this is the only few times where this is actually a real smile. Just like every time he laughs, it feels fake, but this one felt real. Back in his apartment, Arthur bathes his mother. Once again, she asks about the letters from Thomas Wayne. Arthur finally asks what she expects from him, and she answers simply, she wants him to help them, trying to comfort her and perhaps himself. Arthur promises that everything will be fine, and that his comedy will succeed, that money won't be a problem. We can notice how his mental and physical health are not in the best conditions, when he looks like someone who barely eats and plays with a loaded gun. The next day, Arthur follows Sophie through the city, watching from a distance, blending longing with imagination. Despite being an adult man, he has practically nothing. No friends, no education, no social life. He is being separated from society, which does not leave him at peace, and yet is still part of. Later, he attends a stand-up comedy show, studying the performers, taking notes, shaping his own material. When he returns home and begins to write, something shifts. In his home, he lets his inner thoughts flow in what he thinks is a joke. Arthur smiles as he writes, and that's when the film delivers one of its cruelest truths. The worst part of having a mental illness is that people expect you to behave as if you don't. This is as real as distressing. Arthur, this is a joke. For us, who have to reflect on the truth of this, mental illness doesn't arise solely from biological or chemical factors, but also from social issues. And this is the key because the environment in which a person lives, the support or lack thereof they receive both in their daily life and professionally, can make their struggle more bearable or, conversely, much more difficult. Sophie knocks on his door and asks if he's been following her. He's a little nervous and says yes, but after some jokes, he tells her that he does stand-up comedy and invites her. The next day, suddenly he finds himself working with children in a hospital. While doing his job, he drops the weapon he uses for protection and is reported. The guy who gave him the gun said Arthur bought it for him, which is a complete lie, and his boss fires him. Now he's an unemployed guy dressed as a clown at 11 p.m. on a train with an involuntary laugh. There are 3 guys bothering this girl. Arthur has that bad luck to start laughing, attracting the attention of these guys, and they start beating him up. Fed up with their cruelty, he pulls out his gun and shoots one of them in the head. He shoots the other one twice, and then chases and kills him outside the train. Here, we can see one of the symbols present through the film, public transport. If we look at a subway, we'll see all kinds of people. A train car can be a representation of society itself, that is, of different social status, different purchasing power, and different ways of dressing. A complete portrait of ordinary people. Well, it's precisely on the bus where we discover Arthur Fleck's problem, laughter, and how his inability to control it already sets him apart from everyone else. It's very striking. He can't travel like everyone else, and it's the first sign that he doesn't fit in. Then, when he's beaten up for dressing as a clown and laughing on the subway car, the film is telling us that he's different in his way of dressing, or even in his laughter, and that he feels alienated to the point of feeling pain. There are 3 men in suits, quite representative of what it means to be isolated from society by people dressed up in what we would consider acceptable. Upon realizing what he's just done, he panics and flees until he reaches the restroom of a park. There, the anxiety gradually disappears. And it's in this place, something changes within him. Then he begins to dance. It's an abstract scene of liberation. This dance is the breaking point of Arthur, the moment when his transformation begins. At the beginning of the movie, he tells the doctor that the medication wasn't helping him feel better. With this bathroom scene, we notice that he finds relief. He also feels encouraged to go to his neighbor and kiss her, and they spend the night together. He also feels unusual confidence, which allows him to send to hell all his co-workers. The following scene, born from the depression and sadness of having been fired, shows him erasing a phrase on the stairs that has to do with smiling and how positive a smile is, changing it because no one is smiling anymore. But the sadness of the change in the phrase that he has made clashes sharply with how he descends the stairs, going down playfully and kicking the door with great decisiveness. It is a descent of a person overcome by pain and sadness. He is embracing, for the first time, that freedom or that madness. In fact, this scene is already a small version of the final liberation that we will see. Arthur sits beside his mother as they watch a news report together. On screen, Thomas Wayne addresses the recent subway murders, speaking about the victims, who work for his company. He portrays him as a well-educated and upstanding man. When questioned about the public's increasing anger towards the wealthy, Wayne responds by announcing his intention to run for mayor, claiming he wants to restore order. However, when the topic shifts to the killer, Wayne harshly condemns him, calling him a coward for wearing a mask and dismissively referring to those at the bottom of society as clowns that do nothing with their lives. His words enrage many, and in a response, they begin using the image of the clown as a symbol of protest. Not long after, Arthur attends another therapy session. He tells his social worker that she never truly hears him, and admits that, for once, he feels seen, as if he finally realized he exists. She responds coldly, explaining that the budget cuts have ended his treatment and that this will be their final meeting, meaning his medication will be discontinued. She adds that the system has no concern for people like him or her. Everything around him has let him down. There's a saying that goes something like, "The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth." Later that night, Arthur takes the stage at a small comedy club, with Sophie sitting in the crowd. As soon as he steps into the spotlight, he starts laughing non-stop. When he actually gets through a couple of jokes, the room stays silent. No one laughs. He goes outside and sees someone wearing a clown mask in a taxi. This is very important to him because they stare at each other. This is where the truth is revealed to him, that this is the way out, that this is the way he can fit into society. It's even more apparent when Sophie says that the guy is a hero. Life is smiling to Arthur a little bit. It seems, however, when Arthur gets back home, he discovers another letter his mother has written, this time insisting that Thomas Wayne is his real father. He confronts her right away, and Penny tells him that they were once in love, but had to keep their relationship hidden to protect Wayne's image for the difference in social class. The next day, Arthur goes to Wayne's mansion. Now, we see another scene on a train, but everything is completely different. Everyone is reading the news about a killer clown. What does this mean? Arthur no longer attracts attention, but the killer clown, or the future Joker, is able to attract attention. But in a more interesting way, people don't look at him strangely. Instead, they pay attention. Arthur sees this and begins to think that his way of leaving a mark on society could be through his makeup and also through violence. Arthur shows up at Wayne Manor and runs into a young Bruce Wayne, who will eventually become Batman. He tries to entertain him with a few magic tricks, but the moment doesn't last. Alfred steps in and tells Arthur to leave, warning him that he'll call the cops if he doesn't. Arthur pushes back, claiming he's Penny's son and that he needs to speak to Thomas Wayne because he knows the truth. Alfred just laughs it off, saying his mother was delusional. When Arthur gets back to his apartment, he learns that Penny had a stroke and is already being rushed to the hospital. He doesn't think twice and climbs into the ambulance with her. At the hospital, two detectives stop him to ask him questions about the subway killings. His old boss tipped them off about the gun incident involving the kids. Calmly smoking a joint, Arthur tells him that it was only a prop, then walks away to check on his mother. In her room, he turns on the Murray Franklin show, only to be crushed by what he sees. Murray is airing clips from Father's stand-up set, making fun of his show, calling him a joker. Later, back at his apartment, Arthur notices a crowd of protesters outside a movie theater, all wearing clown masks. Thomas Wayne is there too, and Arthur decides to follow him. He sneaks inside and corners Wayne in the bathroom, telling him that Penny is his mother. Wayne shuts him down immediately, saying Penny was mentally ill, had been committed to Arkham, and that Arthur was adopted. Arthur starts laughing, overwhelmed and angry. Wayne takes offense and punches him before storming out. Everything that happens to Arthur suddenly plunges him deeper and deeper into madness, and this transformation occurs when he gets into the refrigerator. After everything Arthur has already endured, the subway murders, the non-stop humiliation, and now Murray, his idol, turning him into a joke. The idea that Thomas Wayne might be his father had been one thing keeping him together. It was a chance at love, at safety, and at finally belonging somewhere. But that hope is ripped away. Wayne humiliates him, and Arthur is left with even a darker truth. The woman he thought was his mother isn't his mother at all. His entire past suddenly feels fake, and somehow it's not even over yet. The next day, Arthur gets a call from Murray's producers inviting him onto the show. He agrees. Later, he's been riding the bus. If we continue with the symbolism of public transport, Arthur's at the back of the bus, alone, with no one sitting next to him, surrounded by graffiti of the colors yellow and red, so frequently used in the film, symbolizing madness, yellow, and violence. Red. Society has clearly abandoned Arthur, and the only things in his head, represented by those graffiti and colors, are those two ideals of violence and madness. When Arthur arrives at Arkham Hospital, he goes through his mother's records and sees everything laid out in black and white. Penny was diagnosed with a serious psychotic disorder. She attempted to take his son's life. Arthur wasn't her biological son. He was adopted, but the worst part comes next. The file reveals that Penny allowed her boyfriend to abuse Arthur. There was a report describing how he was once found tied to a radiator, malnourished, covered in bruises, and suffering from severe head trauma. This is where Arthur finally breaks. His mother had been the one constant in his life, the only person he believed cared about him or gave him any sense of worth. And now that illusion completely shatters. He was already barely holding himself together, and this discovery pulls the last bit of support out from under him. His sense of self collapses entirely. If Penny wasn't really his mother, and worse, if she stood by while he was abused, then everything he thought he knew about his life was built on a lie. So who's Arthur really? He isn't a Fleck, and he isn't a Wayne. He's no one, and the world around him has no mercy to nobodies. Any connection he had to reality slips away in that moment, and in that state of total vulnerability, the dark side of him, the one that's been slowly growing all along, is finally ready to take over. At the same time, the records about his head injury add another tragic layer to his story. It suggests that the trauma may be the reason behind his condition. Every burst of uncontrollable laughter isn't just awkward or uncomfortable. It is a physical reminder of the abuse he endured as a child. Not only did they show us this, he enters Sophie's apartment unannounced, but we also see that Arthur never went out with his neighbor. She was afraid of him and begged him to leave her house because her daughter was sleeping, and he says the following. Arthur imagined everything and made a gesture that I believe was the only real interaction that happened between them, like when they crossed paths in the elevator and we saw him leave the apartment. The following day, Arthur goes to see his mother again, this time calmly smoking with his left hand. He tells her that his laughter was never a condition to be cured, but something that defines him. Then he says something that completely reframes his life. He always thought that he was a tragedy, but now he understands it's a comedy. Moments later, he suffocates her. From this point on, there's no turning back. Whatever was holding Arthur together finally gave away. The side of him that has been buried for years, his anger, his resentment, and bottled up violence, steps forward and takes control. This darker half is the only part of him that has ever felt acknowledged, and it's here the Joker is truly born. The film has been quietly tracing his transformation the entire time, showing how Arthur's shadow slowly grows until it completely replaces him. That's why the movie pays so much attention to physical details. You can see the split between Arthur and the Joker in the way that he moves and carries himself. Arthur is right-handed. The Joker favors his left. Arthur is tense, hunched over and unsure, while the Joker moves with ease and confidence. Arthur wants to follow the rules and be good. The Joker doesn't answer to any moral standard at all. When Arthur says his life is a comedy, he isn't wrong. Comedy comes from the clash between expectation and reality, and Arthur's entire existence is built on that contradiction. A child who's abused and neglected grows up still trying to do things right, only to be met with ridicule instead of kindness. Someone who has already suffered endlessly keeps being pushed further down. That's the joke. His life becomes a dark and cruel comedy that exposes how absurd it is for society to demand his function normally, while denying him any real help, then acting surprised when he finally breaks. Later on, Arthur gets ready for a spot on the Murray Franklin show. He dyes his hair green and begins applying his makeup, fully stepping into the new version of himself, where he feels completely free. When the doorbell suddenly rings, standing outside are Gary and Randall, two former co-workers who came by after hearing about Penny's death. But it quickly became clear that Randall isn't there out of concern. He's nervous because the police are questioning the clowns, and Arthur still has the gun. Fed up with the fake sympathy and self-interest, Arthur snaps and kills Randall. Gary's left frozen in fear, certain he's next. Instead, Arthur calmly tells him he can go, the only one who never made him feel like an outsider. And Arthur remembers that. This moment makes it clear that Arthur's downfall was avoidable. He wasn't born destined to become what he is, with real empathy, support, and compassion, a more human interaction. Proper mental health care and simple respect would have changed his path entirely. Arthur lets Gary live because he had never made him feel invisible or out of place like someone who didn't belong. And that's all Arthur ever really wanted, to be recognized, to belong, and to be treated like a human being. Afterward, Arthur finishes getting dressed, steps into a new suit, and heads out, dancing as he goes. Now, those steps that first seemed so difficult to climb are the descent into madness that Arthur enjoys dancing with grace and carefree freedom. Almost in the first glimpse of the film, we see a very dejected Arthur climbing some stairs. In this scene, we see pain. We see the effort it takes for Arthur to be accepted in that gesture of climbing those long stairs. This generates him a dejection, a weirdness, and above all, a sadness represented by the darkness of the scene. Interestingly, the next descent of stairs that we see Arthur take, which stems from a dream, is a comfortable descent that symbolizes acceptance by the world around him. People applaud him, and his idol embraces him. That is his dream, and that is his desire to achieve it. The next moment that relates to this element is seen after the train shooting, where Arthur Fleck coldly shoots the last man who had harmed him, precisely on the element that now symbolizes transition from death and violence, as well as that scene we talked about before, after sending his co-workers to hell. Thus, the final leap remains painful and abrupt, and it is in this moment that he realizes his mother's problem and the lie she invented. Here again, the colors, the red and the yellow, violence and madness, both in his clothes and on the walls, two colors that are very present throughout the film. And now this is a spiral that cannot be stopped, a descent into the darkest part of himself that can no longer be halted, and that he alone can now embrace. And the best scene in the film occurs right after his abrupt pause, in which the self that embraces madness, and consequently Arthur Fleck finds freedom. If at the beginning of the film we saw him struggling to climb these stairs, doing this work to fit in, now everything is much easier. He's found his place and his identity and the way to be himself, while at the same time society is accepting him. It's ironic that the moment when he's least concerned about being just another face in the crowd and fitting in is the moment when he has the greatest impact and attracts the most followers. Now, there's a light, there's color, and he dances, but he's interrupted when the police start chasing him. He enters a subway, which is full of people wearing clown masks. On his way to the protest, this confuses the police and allows him to escape undetected. The film continues using public transportation to show how now he's no longer a stranger. His image has impacted the people in the city. The train car that symbolized the city and society is now his. It is at this point where it's society itself that now saves him from the student citizens who are after him, obviously comparing to the first scene where he gets beaten up. The true image of Arthur fits into a society and exchanges it for something better, but for something different in which he feels a part of, or even a leader. The Joker now sees how ironic it is that the police are beaten for following the rules, just like what happened to him. Arthur finally makes it to the studio. While he's waiting in the dressing room, Murray comes in and asks him to keep things calm, to not turn the appearance into some kind of statement. Arthur reassures him and makes him one simple request. He wants to be introduced as Joker, the same name Murray once used to laugh at him on air. Soon after, Arthur is called out to the stage. He walks in dancing, completely owning the moment. He tries out a joke about death, but the audience doesn't laugh with him. They laugh at him, then everything shifts. Arthur openly admits that he was the one behind the subway murders and starts talking about how broken the system really is. He calls out the outrage over the deaths of Wayne's employees, pointing out that if someone like him were killed, no one would care at all. Society, he says, is cruel, and people have lost the ability to empathize. Arthur turns on Murray next, accusing him of being part of the problem. He says the only reason why he was invited onto the show was to be ridiculed. Pulling out his gun, he delivers his final joke, asking what happens when a mentally ill, isolated person is abandoned by a system that treats him like trash. The answer comes immediately as he shoots Murray on live television. The entire city watches it as it happens. Chaos erupts in the streets as protests explode everywhere. Arthur is arrested, but on the way to the station, an ambulance driven by rioters slammed into the police car, knocking him out. The protesters pull him free and lift him onto the hood of the wrecked vehicle. He's surrounded by cheering faces. He stands and dances, fully embraced by the crowd. At the same time, Thomas Wayne and his wife are leaving a movie theater. A protester follows them into a dark alley and shoots them both, sparing only their son, Bruce, who is left alone, giving a rise to the Dark Knight, and then Arthur is admitted to Arkham Asylum. In the end, Joker isn't just a story of a man who snaps. It's a story of a man who's slowly, repeatedly pushed until there's nothing left to hold him together. Arthur doesn't become a monster in a vacuum. He's shaped by neglect, cruelty, and indifference. A system that fails him at every moment where compassion could have intervened. Instead, the world responds with ridicule and silence. It is the result of countless small wounds that pile up until a single day becomes unbearable. The Joker says it just takes one bad day to reduce the sanest person to madness. Arthur's story twists the idea even further. His life is made up of nothing but bad days, but it's still that final one, that day where every illusion collapses at once, that completes his transformation. When hope dies, when even the idea of being loved or understood is taken from him, what remains is the Joker, not born from chaos alone, but from a world that has offered no mercy and chose not to care. No one is exempt from anything. Arthur could be you or someone you know. If Arthur had been given another chance at work, if he had a friend who cared about him, if society had understood that he had a mental illness and that doesn't make him inferior in any way, it probably wouldn't have all ended in tragedy.